Okay, so when we're looking at the documents regarding the treatment of, or I guess the positives and the negatives of India, Indian and African imperialism in the 19th century, it's important to see the people who lived there. So, one the documents that we're going to be looking at today, I think, are um, good examples, or at least one of them is a good example of how India was impacted, and then the other is about Africa. Although it's the one for Africa is written by a French guy, it's not written by um, an indigenous person. So let's look at India. So the document written for India is written by a man who lives in Britain, um, and he's a member of British Parliament, so he is obviously a little biased. So you'll see that here, and I've edited it down significantly. Um, so it says the benefits of British rule, and it talks about sort of the good things that Britain brought in, right? Gets rid of sati, brings in education, brings in that development that I had mentioned in the previous video. So there are certainly good things, and he mentions that. Again, I've edited this down pretty significantly. Then he talks about the negatives, the detriments. I will point out here that he's pretty weak on the detriments. There are certainly more things he could have said, and I think um, you'll see that when you read it. Now his summary of it is pretty good. And again, I think he lays out maybe more in the summary than anything else. Like he lays out a balanced perspective. So I think it's important for you to look at. Next piece, as I said, is written by a French guy. He's the prime minister of France. But he also, obviously that gives him a certain perspective. But he is a socialist, right? So he does have that sort of leftist leaning. Um, and he does talk about a lot of the negatives, right? So I touch here on a subject which does not fail to excite or even scandalize a certain number of our friends, the national interest and solidarity of the classes, right? So again, social with classes. Are these questions about which a socialist has the right to be anxious, right? Okay. Blah, blah, blah. In this document, he talks a lot about how people are being treated. In particular, sort of, he doesn't necessarily um, talk about, let's say, imperialism specifically, but he talks about how people are being impacted by this new industrial age. And I would like you to think about this in terms of his view of imperialism. So look at this in terms of how does he view the problems of imperialism in the 19th century, early 20th century, and connected to France. Finally, then you'll also have a little reading and a question that is on page 812, but it's really more of a question of sort of bringing together all of the pieces we've talked about over the last three lessons. What are the positives? What are the negatives of the industrial imperialism, economic imperialism in the 19th century? And then there's going to be an Albert I.O. quiz. So good luck, guys.